This is the CBS Evening News. Dan Rather reporting. Good evening. This is what is happening in China. Nighttime in Beijing brought some violence between soldiers of the People's Liberation Army and pro-democracy demonstrators in the streets. It happened early Tuesday morning, China time, in a suburb of Beijing called Fengtai. That's about 10 miles from Tiananmen Square, heart of the city and heart of the protest. Trucks and armored personnel carriers carrying soldiers armed with AK-47 rifles tried to move out. It's not known if the troops were actually heading for Tiananmen Square. But whatever happened, the pro-democracy demonstrators blocked the road. Some soldiers then got out, throwing bricks, using their belts against protesters, but the demonstrators would not give way, and the army vehicles finally took refuge in a military compound. No serious injuries reported, and no reports of the army actually firing shots. Bruce Morton in Beijing picks up the story.
There was a violent clash, as you say, Dan, but two letters say something not so violent about the way this story is developing. One to the newspaper People's Daily, signed by more than 100 high-ranking military officers opposing Li Peng's declaration of martial law and saying the army won't shoot the people. The other from the students, asking the National People's Congress to talk about how to end martial law and allow the students to go back to class. In the meantime, the siege goes on, and every sunrise seems a victory for the young people in the square. Life is hard for them. Sleep is uneasy and crowded. The hands raised in victory V's sometimes droop. The students try to sweep up the garbage, but there is so much garbage. They wash, but there is so much dirt. Buses ring part of the square, a defense against attack, windows taped to limit the impact of flying glass. Flags flutter, and these big banners, which look like Viking sails. The people huddled outside the Great Hall of the People see each dawn as a victory. Another night passed, and we're still here. By day, helicopters drop leaflets. The army doesn't want to suppress the students, but it must enforce martial law. That's not easy. People Power intercepted this convoy. Troops got an earful from citizens. These guys are marching off to lunch, not war. In the rest of the city, things inched back towards normality Monday. Some buses ran, but the subway was closed, station doors locked. Gas stations opened for the first time in several days. Lines were long, and some people brought tanks to hoard a little, just in case. This man was taking lumber to market. Some shelves were bare, others had produce. But he says he can't get produce from far away. The trucks aren't moving. And the strawberry lady says she's having trouble getting fruit to sell. Traffic policemen worked some corners, not others, and sometimes people, aware of the martial law decree, asked our cameras not to shoot. So there was one clash, but there was not a military effort to drive the students from the square. They have survived one more night, they feel, one more battle. Dan?
Thank you, Bruce Morton. Now, the movement for freedom and reform has sparked a split and a power struggle among the men who rule China. A leadership split between hardliners and the compromise and wait them out faction of the party and the government. It's impossible to tell which side has or may get the upper hand. Our veteran China correspondent John Sheehan has the latest on the story of trouble at the top in Beijing.
Dan, the Chinese leadership is so paralyzed and in such disarray that it is fighting for its own survival as well as trying to put down the pro-democracy revolt. There is now a second encampment of pro-democracy protesters on the doorstep of Zhongnan High, headquarters of the Communist Party and the government. Beyond the squatters' laundry line, beyond a mound of garbage, a crowd of ordinary citizens calls day and night for the ouster of the hardliners, Prime Minister Li Peng and the formerly revered Supreme Leader Deng Xiaoping. Even staunch party members like Yang Shanyi, a leading intellectual, are defecting from Deng and Li.
History may say that this is as significant, if not more significant, than the French Revolution.
What would be a really Chinese solution to this crisis?
Well, we won't send them to the guillotine. We'll just ask them to resign.
60-year-old Li was a colorless bureaucrat until his elevation last year from Minister of Electrical Power to Prime Minister. Some Chinese, appalled at his ruthless reaction to the student demonstrations, ascribe it to his education in the Soviet Union under Stalin. Deng's hand-picked government is immobilized. Martial law is a failure. His position and Prime Minister Li's are eroding with every hour that the nonviolent protests continue.
By failing to respond reasonably when it could have, the Communist Party brought China to the brink of chaos. Neither the government nor the students control the situation anymore.
The students on the square are now as factionalized as the communist leaders. One glimmer of hope is that the siege of Tiananmen might be ended by the students themselves. If all the factions do agree to pull out of the square, they can always come back, a fact of which the government is all too painfully aware. John Sheehan, CBS News, Beijing.
At a premium in Beijing and throughout China now is reliable news about what is and is not really happening. For one thing, there's very little on Chinese television or radio, for that matter, in the Chinese newspapers. Chinese college students in this country are sending news reports to Beijing on fax machines. The official Chinese government and party spin isn't getting much play, as we hear from Barry Peterson.
This is a city fighting for information and getting it. Workers sold out their copies of this small newspaper at their front gate. Did the government censor their issue? We're the ones in control of this newspaper, says the editor proudly. The government isn't here. Posters pasted on light poles or at bus stops tell what the government will not. The troops didn't get into the city, he says. How incredible. Students bicycle to neighborhood meetings to explain their demands and tell about the latest troop movements. A crowd at a subway station a dozen miles away hears the same thing. At Chinese television, reportedly now under direct army control, there was more information being broadcast than expected, including an interview with a general. Will he move on the city? He admits we're in a difficult position. There are a lot of people up ahead. Foreign journalists are under the tightest of restrictions, told to take virtually no pictures, do no interviews with students. Few are obeying the government's decree.
The reported deadline for clearing the square will come 43 hours.
And the long-distance phone lines still work. Al Passan's report was instantly beamed back into China on Voice of America.
Just all the martial law orders are being flagrantly violated, both by the people and by the journalists, so it's almost as if it doesn't exist.
Sometimes foreign television crews are angrily waved away. You're violating our laws. More often, applauded. Thank you for being here, people say. Sometimes the subject of a speech. We want our story told, says this student. Help the foreigners. To a government under siege, the flow of information to its own people and to the outside world is suddenly deemed dangerous and illegal. But it has not stopped. Barry Peterson, CBS News, Beijing.
Voice of America now says that China has started jamming 3 of the 5 frequencies VOA uses to beam Mandarin Chinese language broadcasts to China. Still to come on tonight's CBS Evening News, the U.S. Secretary of State lectures Israel. Correspondent Martha Teichner has a story of Israel's attempts to suppress the news. And Terrence Smith on city air that's dangerous to your health.
Now, new scientific tests prove Heart's Blockade Repellent gives your pet total protection against fleas and ticks, or your money back. Unsolicited, here's what some satisfied Blockade users have told us.
My golden retriever suffered with fleas and ticks.
In talking about Bush administration Middle East policy, Baker addressed the leading U.S. pro-Israel lobbying group meeting in Washington, and he said it is, quote, high time now for serious dialogue between Israel and the Palestinians.
For Israel, now is the time to lay aside once and for all the unrealistic vision of a greater Israel. Israeli interests in the West Bank and Gaza, security and otherwise, can be accommodated in a settlement based on Resolution 242. Forswear annexation. Stop settlement activity. Allow schools to reopen. Reach out to the Palestinians as neighbors who deserve political rights.
Baker's tough words on Israel were met with official silence. In Israel, a right-wing cabinet minister has proposed that the occupied territories be sealed off for up to 3 months, closed to journalists. Images of violence against Palestinians are key for the Palestinians to promote, for the Israelis to try and downplay. More about this complicated situation for Martha Teichner in Jerusalem.
In Gaza, during the worst day of violence of the Palestinian uprising, the Intifada, the only television pictures of the deadly disturbances were shot secretly by Palestinians using home video cameras. Why? Because the Israeli army had sealed off the Gaza Strip to keep Palestinians in and journalists out. This has become the Israelis' tactic of choice in the battle to stop further erosion of their public image, particularly in Washington, where winning their public relations war against the Palestinians is critical.
What is important for them, what is really the focus, that's America, because of the effect of these pictures on the American public, on the American jury, and on Congress, and on the administration.
The Israelis have a problem, how not to raise the red flag of press censorship. At the same time, they systematically try to wipe image-damaging evidence of their hardline policies off American television screens. The result? Instant no-go zones, closed today, open tomorrow. A patrol leader just has to pull out his official paper, pre-signed and dated, anywhere anything is or might be happening.
I insist that our policy to allow press coverage is one of the most open in the world.
But not without subterfuge. Israeli police driving cars marked TV have jumped out and arrested Palestinians. Militant Jewish settlers have also impersonated the press on their vigilante patrols.
I think that it's time that the press understood how it feels to travel through those areas if you're not the press.
The intention to discredit the press, with the result that TV camera crews more and more are becoming targets. Indirectly, the Israelis make coverage more difficult and more dangerous, but they've covered themselves against accusations of censorship. After 18 months of the Intifada, Israel has not been able to make the violence go away. It has come up with techniques limiting TV access to it, ways of protecting its image without actually having to say, no news is good news. Martha Teichner, CBS News, Jerusalem.
There is a report today that an alleged Palestinian bomb maker arrested in West Germany last year was quickly freed because he worked for West German intelligence. That claim was made by the West German news magazine Stern. 5 weeks after Jordanian-born Marwan Kresat was released, a bomb of the kind he reportedly was capable of making blew up Pan Am Flight 103 over Scotland. A West German official denies Kresat was a West German intelligence agent. Trading, the Federal Reserve Board, along with central banks in Japan, Britain, and West Germany, today reportedly made heavy sales of dollars. This was an effort to keep the value of the dollar from climbing. It didn't do much good. And White House correspondent Wyatt Andrews reports all that triggered an unusual reaction from the Bush administration.
It might sound strange, but the dollar is now worth more, and the White House is worried. As currency traders in Tokyo and London push the value of the dollar higher again today, the Bush administration, which usually avoids all comment on the dollar, released a public statement. The dollar's recent rise against other major currencies, the statement said, is a cause of concern. If the rise is sustained, it could undermine international efforts to reduce global trade imbalances. The administration went public after failing in quiet efforts to drive the dollar down.
The Fed did intervene to sell dollars to try to stop the dollar's increase, but it had very little effect.
Even with the U.S. trying to push it down, the dollar has just risen past two key barriers. It buys more than 140 Japanese yen for the first time in a year and a half, and 2 German marks for the first time in 2.5 years. The rise in the dollar frightens the Bush administration because it hurts American exports and threatens the economic recovery.
If exports stall out in the States, as we expect it to do so with this level of the dollar, then the whole U.S. economy will stall out.
The unrest in China even plays a role here. It's made the markets nervous.
There's a lot of instability in East Asia, largely because of the Chinese problem, and Asian investors, in light of that instability and uncertainty, are sending their money to the United States.
Experts say today's White House statement is a sign of frustration that the dollar has reached levels beyond what the U.S. can control. It used to be that a strong dollar was welcome news because it meant that U.S. tourists overseas could buy more. Today, it triggers fears that U.S. companies can't sell more. Wyatt Andrews, CBS News, the White House.
Takes a new turn. Oatmeal Goodness Bread introduces English muffins with oat bran. All the important oat bran of a bowl of oatmeal in each one. And a crunchy, chewy taste you can't turn down. New from Oatmeal Goodness.
Accusations today that the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, in effect, has been deliberately lowballing estimates of urban smog pollution. CBS News Washington correspondent Terrence Smith reports on the cities, the summer, and the smog.
If you thought there was a lot of smog during the long, hot summer last year, you don't know the half of it, literally. A new study released today finds that the Environmental Protection Agency consistently understates the problem. Even though there are many monitors available in most urban areas, the EPA procedure, which it defends as valid, is to record only one. Using a broader sample, an environmental group established that 29 cities suffered 12 or more days of health-threatening smog last summer, an average of 1 day every week.
We think that whenever you have a value in a metropolitan area that exceeds the EPA standards, that is an indication of a smog day, and the public ought to know that.
How bad is it? In Houston, the smog reached dangerous levels on 54 days, but the EPA reported only 21. In the New York area, 32 days of actual smog danger versus 19 reported by the EPA. In Washington, the nation's capital had 18 days of actual health-threatening smog versus a reported 10.
They have underestimated the problem, even though they've been telling us how great a problem it is.
Los Angeles, which set the nation's record with 170 smog alerts last year, is now introducing new, clean-burning, methanol-fueled buses to ease the problem. The problem is everywhere, even windswept Kennebunkport, where President Bush spends his weekends. 13 danger days last year.
It wasn't because of motorcades, it's because of the polluted air masses moving up from the Boston to Washington corridor.
Nor is the forecast for this summer any better. The general warming trend is expected to make a bad problem worse. Terrence Smith, CBS News, Washington.
Baseball Commissioner A. Bartlett Giamatti today set June 26th as hearing date on alleged gambling activities by Cincinnati Reds manager Pete Rose. Rose was scheduled to appear before the commissioner Thursday, but his attorneys asked for and got the 30-day extension.
Smells good.
Like a Carolina pine forest. That's Lysol Pine Action. I cleaned this morning. It disinfects and works fast. But the scent lasts for hours.
It's nice, but how'd they get a pine forest in there?
Lysol Pine Action. The clean of pine every time.
New Light Scent Love My Carpet. The light scent not to be made light of. It's tougher on tough carpet odors than Arm & Hammer Light. Light Scent Love My Carpet. Delightful.
Somewhere there's got to be a cure for athlete's foot.
There is. Step up to the mic.
Mike?
Mycotin. It cured my athlete's foot. It's got something the others don't. Myconazole. There's nothing more powerful.
Hey!
I'm giving away advice, not Mycotin.
Say, what you got for my athlete's foot?
Step up to the mic.
Mike?
Mycotin. It cures athlete's foot. There's even a deodorant Mycotin.
Then I'll take the Mycotin. To go.
Step up to the cure. Step up to the mic. Mycotin.
Did you know that certain kinds of diet frozen foods get 40, even 50% of their calories from fat? Fat. Eat smarter. The one you can trust is Le Menu Lifestyle. Every serving is under 300 calories, helps you limit sodium, cholesterol, and is low fat. The only thing we didn't touch is the taste. Le Menu Lifestyle. Eat smarter.
The pro-democracy Give Us Freedom uprisings in Beijing and other cities are only the latest signs of rapid change in China. For example, correspondent Bob Simon has a report on the new elite in the country, an elite that gives communism some difficulty.
A Fred Astaire, he's not. A pool shark, he'll never be. Barely a shot goes in. But Zhang Guoxi's own pockets run very deep. Boss Zhang, as everyone calls him, is reputedly the richest man in China, said to be worth at least $30 million. He's also a card-carrying member of the Communist Party. And this is the house that Zhang built. His own Forbidden City, every bit as baroque as the estates of America's first robber barons. It is a monument to free enterprise, to a capitalist success story so pure that these days you could only find it in communist China. His tale would make Horatio Alger blush. The son of peasants, he became a carpenter at 15, carved out his fortune making statues and shrines for export to Japan. Boss Zhang makes a better Buddha. His temples are his factories. He's got 30 now, building new ones all the time. This month he opens in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. But the seat of his empire is Yujiang County, somewhere between Charles Dickens and George Orwell. He employs 4,000 workers, pays them double the going government rate, provides food, dormitories, training, and retirement. It is his very own welfare state with his very own flag, surrounded by moats and by the rice paddies of China. How does Mr. Zhang feel about the growing inequality that's coming along with the free enterprise, the new free enterprise in China?
We have new policies now. Those who can work hard and make more money should be allowed to do so. Obviously, this will lead to some differences.
Boss Zhang, the Rolex revolutionary, has been good for the county. He, not the state, brought in running water and television. The county cadres reciprocated by providing around-the-clock security and a police escort for his chauffeur-driven Nissan sedan. It is a symbiotic relationship between old rulers and new money. They're in bed together all over China, but you can always tell them apart. The old elite go to the same tailor and spend a lot of time together. The new elite, from the millionaire parasol prince of Beijing to the millionaire banquet baron of Nanchang, are all self-made men, individualists. Their natural habitat, the lobbies of China's new luxury hotels. It is here most evenings you can spot a man named Mr. Tu. His motto, can do. If you have business in Beijing, Mr. Tu is the man to see. He is an opener of doors. You've made a lot of money.
Not a lot of, by American standards, I must say.
But this isn't America, this is China.
Oh, yeah.
In a country where getting a telephone can take years, Mr. Tu has 3 telexes, 2 fax machines, 2 personal computers, 2 Chinese English electric typewriters, and plenty of plastic. All that, his connections, and
Mr. Tu's agency works around the clock.
That seems to be the secret of the new elite, simple as it sounds. Mrs. Xu Shehua hasn't stopped working since she started as a street peddler here 10 years ago. At 64, she is now the undisputed dumpling queen of Xi'an, owner of the first fast food franchise in China's ancient imperial capital, and expanding all the time. Mrs. Xu's dumplings are simply the hottest thing in town. Serving the people, as Mao might say, good communists all, because today's communism has been very, very good for capitalists. Low wages, no strikes, little competition. In China today, the new elite means business. Bob Simon, CBS News, Xi'an.
Isolation affected her mind and body. Scientists say they hope this experiment will help them prepare people for space travel. Her first words when she came out, she said, "Wow, man." She's been practicing